Have you ever looked across the dinner table and felt like the person sitting across from you, your husband of 20, 30, maybe even 40 years, had somehow become a stranger? You still care for him. You still share a home, a history, a family. But something's changed, and maybe it's not one big moment you can point to. It's more like a slow drift, like waves gently pulling two boats farther apart. He hasn't done anything terribly wrong, and yet you catch yourself feeling distant, tired, maybe even invisible. You wonder if it's just you. But the truth is, this quiet shift happens in so many long-term marriages, and hardly anyone talks about it. It's not about falling out of love. It's about realizing that love, real love, should feel like partnership, like being seen, heard, and valued. And over time, when the emotional weight becomes one-sided, when communication fades, and when you feel more like the caretaker than the companion, something inside begins to dim. Maybe you've been carrying too much for too long. Maybe you've stopped asking for more because it never came. Or maybe, like many women your age, you've simply reached a point where you want peace more than you want to fix things. In today's video, we're going to talk about why so many women, after decades of marriage, begin to emotionally withdraw from their husbands. Not out of anger, but out of quiet self-preservation. And if this sounds like your story, stay with me. Because you are not alone. And it's not too late to understand what's really happening and what can still be saved. Let's begin with something few people see, but every woman feels deep in her bones: the emotional labor. It's invisible to the world, yet it weighs heavier than we ever admit. From the outside, it might look like nothing more than remembering birthdays or scheduling appointments, but you and I both know it's so much more. It's holding the emotional rhythm of an entire family in your hands. It's noticing when your husband's mood shifts, smoothing over the tension before it turns into silence. It's planning the holidays, writing the cards, remembering who likes what, and keeping the peace when no one else thinks to. It's years, sometimes decades, of being the one who holds everything together, emotionally and logistically. And it adds up, especially when no one sees it, especially when he doesn't. Many women in long-term marriages find themselves quietly exhausted, not just from the doing, but from the carrying. And here's the most painful part. Most men don't even realize it. They think of marriage as something that just works, not realizing it works because someone is constantly tending to it. And that someone is often the wife. She's the one remembering, adjusting, checking in, making sure everyone's okay. But who checks on her? Over time, this imbalance grows heavier. At first, it might just feel like stress or fatigue, but slowly it becomes something deeper, a quiet resentment. Not because she doesn't love him, but because she feels alone in the loving. She begins to ask questions she never dared speak aloud. Why is it always me holding things together? Would he even notice if I stopped? And one day, without fanfare or a single dramatic moment, she starts to emotionally retreat. Not with cruelty, but with quiet resignation. Because love without support turns into obligation. And no woman, no matter how strong, can carry everything forever. This is where so many marriages begin to fray. Not from betrayal or shouting, but from the silence that grows when emotional labor is one-sided and unnoticed. But awareness is the first step toward change. If you've ever felt this way, know that you're not selfish, you're simply tired. And if he's willing to truly see that, maybe, just maybe, things can begin to shift. In the beginning, conversations flowed like warm rivers. You'd talk for hours about your childhoods, your dreams, your plans for the future. You laughed over silly things, whispered secrets late at night, and found comfort just in the sound of each other's voice. But somewhere along the way, the words began to fade. Not all at once. It started subtly. A quick, "How was your day?" without waiting for the full answer. A distracted nod at dinner. A growing silence that settled between you like an unwelcome guest. And now the conversations have turned into routines, schedules, chores, doctor's appointments. You speak, but it feels like talking at someone, not with them. And sometimes it feels like no one is really listening anymore. This is one of the most painful shifts in a long-term marriage. Not because the love is gone, but because the connection feels lost. For women especially, communication is not just a way to exchange information. It's a way to bond, to feel known, understood, and close. Without it, she starts to feel invisible. It's not that she wants endless romance or poetic declarations. She just wants to be heard, to be asked, "What are you feeling today?" And have that question mean something, to share her worries without being brushed off or met with silence. To feel like her inner world still matters to the person who promised to love her most. When this emotional intimacy fades, so does the warmth, and the distance grows. Some women try to speak up, hoping to bridge the gap, but when their words fall flat or go unnoticed, they stop trying. And that quiet retreat, it becomes a habit, a kind of emotional survival, because it's hard to keep opening your heart when it feels like no one's really on the other side. And so she starts sharing less, holding back more, nodding and smiling even when she feels lonely sitting just inches away from the man she married. But here's the truth. Meaningful communication can be revived. It doesn't take grand gestures, just small moments of presence. Putting down the phone, turning off the TV, looking into each other's eyes and asking sincerely, "How are you really?" Because in the end, it's not about perfect words. It's about showing up, fully, honestly, and consistently, even after all these years. It's one of those topics people rarely bring up in serious conversation because it seems so ordinary, housework. But after decades of doing it, the weight of it becomes anything but ordinary. From the early years of raising children to the later years of retirement, the responsibility never seems to stop. There's always laundry to fold, dishes to wash, meals to plan, groceries to pick up, floors to sweep. And somewhere along the line, that unspoken expectation formed. She'll handle it, because she always has. Even after the kids are grown and gone, the pattern often continues. He might say, "Just tell me what you need," but that in itself becomes another task, another thing she has to manage. So she does what she's always done, quietly, constantly, resentfully. Not because she minds helping, she's done it with love for years, but because she's tired. Tired of being the only one noticing the clutter. Tired of cleaning up after an adult who seems perfectly capable. Tired of being expected to keep the home running while he rests, watches TV, or disappears into his hobbies. She looks around and asks, "Why is it still all on me?" It's not about wanting perfection. It's about wanting fairness, wanting a partnership, not a second job she didn't sign up for in retirement. And the resentment doesn't explode. It simmers. Each forgotten plate, each pair of socks left on the floor, each sigh of frustration when she asks for help and feels like a nag. Over time, the love she once poured into creating a warm, comfortable home turns into a quiet bitterness. Not because she stopped caring, but because she feels taken for granted. And here's the twist many men don't see. It's not the cleaning itself that hurts, it's the feeling of being alone in it, unnoticed, unsupported. In a time of life that's supposed to bring peace and rest, many women feel like nothing has changed. Their role as caretaker never ended, it just became invisible. But it doesn't have to stay this way. Sometimes all it takes is a shift in awareness. A husband asking, "What can I take off your plate today?" A sincere offer to share the load, not because she asked, but because he sees her. Because even small acts of help say something bigger. "I value what you do. I'm with you. We're still a team." And when a woman feels that again, really feels it, something softens, something reawakens. Because love lives in the little things. Even the ones we do with dish soap and rubber gloves. There comes a time in life, often quietly without warning, when a woman starts to feel something shift deep inside her. She begins to crave more. Not more things, but more meaning. More experiences, more depth, more life. It's not a midlife crisis. It's a reawakening. After years of caregiving, of raising children, of working and worrying, she starts to ask herself, "Who am I now when no one needs me in the same way?" And for many women in their 60s, the answer is both exciting and bittersweet. She wants to travel, take classes, volunteer, learn a new language, maybe even start a garden she's always dreamed of. She wants to live more intentionally, to explore parts of herself that had to wait for decades. But here's where the heartbreak often begins. Her husband doesn't feel the same. He prefers routine, wants to stay home, doesn't see the need for change. He's comfortable, and to him, that's enough. But for her, it's not. not anymore. It's not that she no longer loves him. It's that their worlds are no longer growing in the same direction. She feels herself evolving, and he's standing still. She tries to bring him along. Let's go somewhere new this weekend. Would you take a class with me? Let's start walking every morning, just the two of us. But time after time, he shrugs it off. Says he's fine just the way things are. And slowly, painfully, she stops asking. Because nothing feels lonelier than dreaming beside someone who has stopped dreaming. The emotional distance begins to widen, not because of conflict, but because of inertia. He's not changing, and she can't stop growing. And so, a gap forms, not visible to others, but deeply felt within. She starts doing things on her own, making her own plans, finding joy and stimulation in places he no longer follows. And sometimes, without even realizing it, she begins building a life that no longer fully includes him. This isn't about selfishness, it's about survival. A woman who suppresses her growth for too long begins to feel trapped. And no amount of routine can make up for the ache of unlived potential. But here's what's powerful. It doesn't have to end this way. Growth doesn't mean growing apart, if both people are willing to stretch. All it takes is curiosity, a willingness to evolve together, even slowly, because the most beautiful kind of love in later life isn't built on staying the same. It's built on saying, I want to know the new you, and I want you to know the new me. That's how two people can keep choosing each other, no matter how much they change. There's a kind of ache that has nothing to do with the body and everything to do with feeling unseen. For many women in long-term marriages, intimacy isn't just about physical closeness, it's about being emotionally connected. It's about feeling wanted, not out of obligation, but from genuine affection. It's the small touches, the warm glances, the unspoken understanding between two hearts that once beat in rhythm. But somewhere along the journey, that connection begins to fade. At first, it's just a shift. Maybe the kisses grow less frequent. Maybe he no longer reaches for her hand during a movie. Maybe the bedroom becomes more about sleep than about closeness. She tells herself it's normal. It's just age. Just stress, just life. But deep down, something starts to feel missing. Because intimacy isn't just physical, it's deeply emotional. It's the feeling of being chosen, day after day. The feeling that your presence still lights up someone's world, that you're still beautiful in their eyes, even with silver in your hair and softness in your skin. When that feeling disappears, a quiet grief sets in, not loud or dramatic, just silent. And what makes it harder is how little it's talked about. Women are told that after a certain age, desire fades. That romance is for the young, that this emptiness is just something to accept. But that isn't true. Not entirely, because a woman's need to feel loved, seen, and held doesn't vanish with age. It simply deepens. It becomes richer, more layered, more tender. So when her husband stops noticing, when the compliments stop coming, when his touch becomes rare or absent altogether, she doesn't just feel neglected, she feels forgotten. And that's when the emotional withdrawal begins, not because she wants to shut down, but because she no longer knows how to reach him. And worse, she's not sure he even wants her to. But here's the thing, intimacy can be rekindled. It doesn't require youthful passion. It requires presence. Looking at each other, talking honestly, touching gently, remembering what made you both feel alive, together. Even a soft hand on her back while she's doing the dishes can say, I still see you. I still want you close. Because in the end, intimacy isn't measured by frequency. It's measured by meaning. And when two people remember that, even after decades, the spark doesn't die. It just needs to be invited back. For years, retirement is painted as the reward, the finish line, the moment when life finally slows down and you can breathe, travel, and enjoy each other's company without the rush of work or the weight of raising a family. But what no one really talks about is how complicated this chapter can be, especially in a marriage. Because suddenly, everything shifts. The structure of the day, the rhythm of life, the way time stretches, sometimes beautifully and other times uncomfortably. And for many women, this is when a strange tension begins to surface. She's spent decades managing, multitasking, nurturing. She's looked forward to retirement as her time, a chance to rediscover joy, hobbies, rest, even a little space for herself. But instead of freedom, she finds herself with a husband who now seems lost. No work, no schedule, no clear sense of purpose. And so he turns to her, not as a partner, but as entertainment, a guide, a daily source of structure and companionship. And while that may sound sweet on the surface, it can quickly feel suffocating, because the truth is, she wasn't waiting around to become someone's cruise director. She was waiting to exhale. Instead, she's suddenly responsible for filling his time too, suggesting activities, cooking more meals, being on all the time. And if he has no outside interests, no hobbies, no friends, no projects, then her world becomes his entire world. It's not fair, and it's not sustainable. At first, she might try to adapt, but soon the weight of it begins to press down. Where is the quiet she hoped for? Where is the independence she earned? And just like that, the golden years feel more like a gilded cage. What makes it harder is that society rarely prepares couples for this part. They talk about financial planning, but not emotional planning. They don't say, how will you both spend your days apart and together? How will you give each other space while still staying connected? Because without space, without separate lives that enrich the shared one, marriage and retirement can become a pressure cooker, and she starts to feel trapped in a life she didn't agree to. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Retirement can be beautiful, peaceful, and fulfilling if both partners enter it with clarity, communication, and care. If he's willing to explore his own identity beyond her, if she's given room to breathe, if they find new rhythms that honor both their needs. Because this chapter isn't just about being together all the time, it's about learning how to be yourselves and still choose each other again and again. It doesn't take shouting, or slamming doors, or some dramatic argument in the middle of the night. Sometimes the greatest pain in a marriage comes not from conflict, but from silence. It's when she speaks, and no one truly listens. When she shares her feelings, her thoughts, her needs, and they vanish into thin air as if they never mattered. At first, she repeats herself. She asks again. She tries different tones, different words, hoping to be heard. Not just heard, but understood. But over time, a quiet truth settles in her chest. He isn't really listening. Not deeply. Not with presence. Not with care. And that truth hurts more than any fight ever could. Because all she ever wanted was to feel seen, to know that her thoughts still carried weight in the life they built together, that her voice didn't become background noise just because the years have passed. And when that validation disappears, she begins to disappear too, emotionally. It might not show on the outside. She still smiles, still makes dinner, still asks about his day. But inside, she's shrinking, pulling back, not out of bitterness, but out of exhaustion. Because after a while, trying to be heard becomes its own kind of labor. And when it's ignored long enough, a woman learns to stop trying. She turns inward, focuses on herself, protects what little emotional energy she has left. And what's left in the marriage begins to feel more like cohabitation than connection. It's not that she doesn't care anymore. It's that she no longer has the strength to keep asking for something that should be freely given. Appreciation, respect, basic emotional presence. And yet, the solution isn't as complicated as it seems. She doesn't need flowers every week. She doesn't need long letters or grand gestures. She just needs awareness. A moment where he looks her in the eye and says, I see how much you do. I'm sorry I haven't been listening. Tell me again. I want to understand. It's never too late to show someone they matter. But time does run out on effort, on energy, on trying. So if you're listening to this and realizing she's grown quiet, don't wait for her to speak louder. Listen more closely. Notice more deeply. Because when a woman no longer feels heard, she stops offering her heart. And once that happens, reaching her again takes more than words. It takes truth. It takes humility. And most of all, it takes love that shows up when it matters most. There comes a season in a woman's life when the passage of time feels different. She starts attending more funerals than weddings. Friends receive diagnoses. News of someone's passing arrives unexpectedly, and the ticking clock that once felt far away starts to echo a little louder. It's in this chapter, often after 60, sometimes before, that a quiet realization rises to the surface. Life is short. And not in a cliché sort of way, but in the deepest, most personal way. The kind that makes her sit alone with a cup of tea and ask herself the questions she's been avoiding for years. Am I happy? Do I feel loved? Is this really how I want to spend the years I have left? And if the answers leave her feeling hollow, she doesn't panic. She doesn't shout. She simply begins to change. She lets go of small talk. She stops pretending. She no longer has the energy for performances that cost her peace. And often, that includes the marriage she once worked so hard to protect. Not necessarily ending it, but stepping back emotionally, protecting her inner life, preserving her softness, choosing calm over conflict, because at this age, she's not interested in begging for affection. She's not going to chase attention. She's not willing to keep fighting for what should be freely offered: kindness, respect, love. Instead, she turns inward. She finds joy in her own routines, peace in solitude, fulfillment in the smallest, most sacred parts of her day. She may still care for her husband, deeply even, but she no longer carries the illusion that caring is enough, not if it costs her peace. And while outsiders might not notice, those closest to her begin to sense the shift. She's quieter, more distant, not angry, but no longer available in the way she used to be. And that's what makes this so heartbreaking, because it didn't have to be this way. This wasn't the plan. She dreamed of growing old together, with laughter, with grace, with shared mornings and held hands. But that vision requires effort from both people. And somewhere along the way, she realized she'd been dreaming it alone. Still, even now, hope isn't gone. But it does look different. Hope now means peace. It means choosing herself, sometimes for the first time in her life. Because when a woman realizes how precious time really is, she no longer waits for someone else to give her permission to live it well. She gives it to herself. And if her partner wants to walk beside her in this new chapter, he'll have to meet her there, fully, intentionally, and without delay, because she's moving forward. And time, as she now knows, won't wait for anyone. So if you've been sitting quietly with these feelings, nodding along, maybe even wiping away a tear you didn't expect, please hear this. You are not alone. What you're feeling isn't selfish. It isn't dramatic. It's real. And it's shared by countless women who've poured their hearts into their marriages, only to one day look up and wonder, when did I stop feeling seen? But here's the beautiful truth. Just as love can fade, it can also return. Not in the way it looked when you were young, not through grand gestures or passionate declarations, but through quiet effort. A listening ear, a soft hand on your back, a question asked, not out of habit, but out of care. How are you really? And if you're the husband listening today, maybe you didn't know how far she'd drifted. Maybe no one ever taught you how to hold space for her feelings. But it's not too late. It never is, as long as you're willing to meet her, not where she used to be, but where she is now. The years have changed you both. You've endured seasons of joy and hardship. You've built a life together, and maybe that life is still worth fighting for. Because at this stage of life, love isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about choosing each other again, even after decades, even after the silence, even when the words are hard to find. So whether you're the one pulling away or the one just beginning to notice, let this be your invitation to pause, to reflect, to reach out with a soft heart and an open hand, because love at its best is not loud. It's consistent, it's tender, and it's still possible, even now, especially now.